Your tax rate didn't change. Your paycheck might even look bigger than it did 2 years ago. And yet somehow, at the end of every month, there's less left over. Rent takes more. Food takes more. Fuel takes more. The numbers on your bank statement keep moving in the right direction, but the life those numbers buy keeps getting smaller. This is not an accident, and it is not your imagination. Governments have never needed to announce a tax increase to make you poorer. They have always had quieter methods. Methods that don't require a vote, don't appear on a form, and don't come with a politician standing at a podium taking credit. Methods so well disguised that most people spend their entire lives paying them without ever recognizing what's happening. This is the story of those methods, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. Most people understand taxes the way governments want them to, as the visible lines on a form: income tax, sales tax, property tax, the deduction from the paycheck, the percentage on the receipt, the annual filing that reminds you exactly how much the state took. Those taxes are real, but they're also the part of the system that's designed to be seen. Visible taxes create visible anger. Raise the income tax rate and voters notice immediately. Raise property taxes and homeowners organize. Raise sales taxes and businesses lobby against it. The political cost of visible taxation is high, which means governments have always had a strong incentive to find less visible alternatives, and they have, for thousands of years. The oldest trick in the book didn't involve paper money or central banks or digital payments. It involved a coin and a set of scales. In the Roman Empire, the denarius was the currency that held the whole system together. Soldiers were paid in it. Merchants traded with it. Citizens trusted it the way people today trust a currency backed by a major government, not because they examined its silver content every morning, but because generations of use had built confidence into the metal itself. Running the empire was expensive. Armies along thousands of miles of frontier, roads connecting the known world, bureaucrats managing an administration that stretched from Britain to Mesopotamia, and constantly, the pressure of wars, revolts, and rivals that required immediate spending the treasury couldn't always cover. Raising taxes was dangerous. Emperors who pushed too hard on taxation faced unrest, revolt, and the particular career hazard of being replaced by a general who promised something better. So they found the quieter solution. They reduced the silver content of the coin, a little at first, then more again. The face value stayed the same, the official exchange rate stayed the same, but the actual metal content dropped quietly, consistently, across generations of emperors who each inherited the problem and passed it on slightly worse than they found it. By the 3rd century, a coin that had once been largely silver was essentially bronze with a thin silver wash that rubbed off in your hands. The state had created more money from the same amount of metal and used it to pay its obligations, and the population paid, not through a tax bill, through inflation. The prices of everything rose because the money buying everything was worth less. No emperor stood up and announced a price increase. The market did it for them. Coin debasement was taxation with a mint stamp, and the principle has never gone away. Modern governments don't shave silver from coins. They have more sophisticated instruments, which is not quite the reassurance it sounds like. Inflation is the contemporary version of the same extraction, and the important thing to understand about inflation is that it doesn't need to be caused entirely by government to serve government's purposes. Oil shocks, supply chain collapses, housing shortages, labor markets, all of these can push prices higher independently, but governments and central banks can contribute. Deficit spending pumps money into the economy. Monetary expansion increases the supply of currency. Ultra-low interest rates make borrowing cheap, which encourages more spending. Crisis stimulus, the kind deployed after 2008 and again during COVID, can prevent genuine collapse while also laying the conditions for price increases once the emergency passes. When prices rise faster than wages, purchasing power falls. The government didn't raise your income tax. Your paycheck might even show a higher number. But the distance between what you earn and what you can actually afford quietly narrows. That narrowing is the extraction. It doesn't appear on a form. It appears at the checkout, the gas station, the rent renewal, the mortgage statement. And here's the part that makes this particularly useful for governments. Inflation helps debtors. Governments are among the largest debtors in the world. If a state owes fixed obligations and inflation rises, those obligations become cheaper to service in real terms, as long as interest rates don't rise quickly enough to cancel the effect. Inflation can reduce the real burden of public debt without defaulting without negotiating, and without ever explicitly taxing anyone. It is not called a tax because no legislature voted for it, but it collects from everyone holding money, and it collects most heavily from those who have no assets to ride the wave. Then there is debt itself, which is perhaps the most consequential hidden tax of all, precisely because its costs are so thoroughly displaced in time. Governments borrow to fund wars, build infrastructure, manage crises, and maintain spending when revenues fall short. Borrowing can be genuinely necessary. A state that refuses to run deficits during a depression or a pandemic is not practicing fiscal virtue. It is simply choosing a different and more immediate disaster. But debt is never free. It is a claim on future resources. The spending happens now, the payment comes later, through higher taxes, reduced services, inflation, austerity, or some combination of all of them. After the Napoleonic Wars, Britain carried a debt burden that took generations to work down. After the Second World War, governments across the developed world emerged with debt levels that required decades of growth and financial repression to manage. After 2008, and again after COVID, public borrowing rose sharply. Some of that spending was essential, but once the emergency passed, the debt remained, sitting on public balance sheets requiring interest payments, constraining future choices, and representing a claim that future citizens would eventually have to settle in one form or another. Debt is taxation with a time delay. It allows governments to be generous today while leaving the harder conversation to whoever comes next. And the people who pay for it, through future tax increases, service reductions, or the inflation used to erode its real value, often have no idea they're settling a bill run-up before they were born. Fiscal drag is less dramatic than inflation or debt, but it works with a quiet efficiency that makes it one of the most reliable tools in the arsenal. Here's how it operates. Prices rise. Wages rise to partially compensate. But the tax system's thresholds, the brackets that determine what percentage you pay at each income level, are adjusted slowly, or frozen entirely, or indexed to a measure of inflation that consistently underestimates what households actually experience. Your income is higher in nominal terms. You might even feel briefly, misleadingly, better off when the raise lands. But because the tax system treats higher numbers as higher income, you move into a bracket designed for people who are genuinely wealthier, not people who are earning more simply to stay in the same place in an economy where everything costs more. This is bracket creep. Your real standard of living may be flat or falling, but the tax system collects as though you've gotten richer. The government's revenue rises. Nobody voted for a tax increase. Nothing was announced. The form just quietly took more because the numbers got bigger while the threshold stayed still. Then come the fees. Vehicle registration, court processing charges, parking penalties, road tolls, utility connection fees, licensing requirements, permit applications, administrative charges attached to government interactions that used to be simpler or cheaper or free. Each one taken alone is defensible. Services cost money. Infrastructure requires maintenance. Courts and regulatory bodies require funding. But together these charges add up to a substantial and largely invisible contribution to state revenue, raised without the political confrontation of a tax bill, fragmented across enough individual transactions that the cumulative effect is hard to see. A broad tax increase arrives as one visible fight. A fee increase arrives as a small inconvenience that gets absorbed into the cost of daily life and gradually forgotten. Local governments have become particularly reliant on this approach because they face rising costs with limited revenue tools and strong political constraints against visible tax hikes. Nobody marches against a parking fee. Nobody organizes against a license renewal charge. But multiply 100 small fees across millions of residents and you have a meaningful revenue stream that required no political courage to create. Tariffs deserve their own mention because they are perhaps the most politically sophisticated form of hidden taxation, the one where the government has most successfully convinced the public that the cost lands somewhere else. A tariff is a tax on imports. It is collected from importers and typically passed along in whole or in part through the price of whatever is being imported. Domestic consumers pay more for foreign goods. Domestic businesses that rely on imported components face higher input costs. The state collects revenue. And the political story told around all of this is that foreign countries are paying the price. This framing is enormously effective and almost always incomplete. Tariffs can serve legitimate strategic purposes. protecting critical industries, strengthening bargaining leverage, reducing dependence on adversarial suppliers. These arguments can be real, but the economic costs of tariffs typically fall heavily on domestic households and businesses, even when the political rhetoric points firmly outward. A tariff is a tax with a flag wrapped around it. It is one of history's most durable examples of extraction that feels like protection. So how do you feel the total effect? Think about what happened to a typical household in the years following a major inflationary episode. Wages rose, but more slowly than prices, so purchasing power fell. Frozen tax thresholds meant a larger share of that income went to the state anyway. Higher interest rates pushed up mortgage payments and credit costs. Government fees and charges rose because public budgets faced their own pressures. Tariffs or trade restrictions made certain imported goods more expensive, and the public debt accumulated during the crisis sat waiting, a future cost not yet fully specified but certain to arrive in some form. No single announcement explained any of this. No politician stood up and said, "We are going to take more from you this year." But across all those mechanisms together, the household was paying more and receiving less. The architecture of extraction had operated exactly as designed, distributed across enough systems and time periods that the total effect was felt without the cause being clearly visible. This is not an argument that taxation itself is wrong. Taxes fund the infrastructure of civilization. Roads, courts, schools, hospitals, emergency services, clean water, scientific research, the institutions that make organized society possible. None of these appear through private inspiration alone. A serious society requires serious revenue. The issue is transparency. Visible taxes can be debated. The rate can be challenged. The purpose can be questioned. The fairness can be examined. Democracy, however imperfectly, can engage with a tax it can see. Hidden taxes are different. Inflation, fiscal drag, debt erosion, fees, tariffs, monetary pressure. These operate below the surface of the political conversation. They let governments collect through complexity, and complexity has always been one of the most effective shelters power has ever found. The most effective taxes in history have been the ones people didn't recognize as taxes until their standard of living had already changed. Financial historians spend careers studying the mechanisms by which states have always found ways to claim resources from populations, sometimes openly, sometimes cleverly, sometimes in ways so subtle that the extraction was complete before the pattern was recognized. Rome didn't need to announce a tax increase when it could reduce the silver in a coin. Modern governments don't need to announce a tax increase when they can let inflation do the quiet work, freeze a threshold, raise a fee, impose a tariff, or borrow against a future that hasn't voted yet. The tax form is not the only place the state collects. It is simply the most visible place. And in the history of money and power, visibility has never been the government's preference. If this gave you a different way of looking at the world, subscribe to the Fiscal Record. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.